Congrats to caller 10. You're going to win 2 tickets to My Chemical Romance, the Black Parade 2026. Tuesday, August 18th at Nationals Park. Tickets are on sale now. For tickets and more event information, go to thefandc.com/events, courtesy of Live Nation. Show's brought to you, as always, by the law firm Kondorian Murad, and we're excited right now to go around the NFL with our buddy Sam Monson of the 33rd team. So let's jump out on the Root Guest Hotline. Spin around the league. Sam, I want to start with quarterbacks. We know that the competition, if there was one in Minnesota, is over. Kyler Murray over J.J. McCarthy. Sounds like we've still got some drama in Atlanta with Tua and Michael Penix, and then in Arizona potentially as well after Carson Beck's debut performance in the preseason. What should we be monitoring now in terms of quarterback competitions?
Yeah, I think you've named most of them there, and then obviously Cleveland being the other one with Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders, and somebody, trying to desperately win that competition, or at least Todd Monken hoping somebody desperately tries to win that competition. That's interesting because they're such wildly different quarterbacks in terms of the backstory. You've got this Deshaun Watson right now representing maybe the single worst personnel move in the history of the NFL. And Shedeur Sanders, the draft story that he was a year ago, and the slide from being a potential first-rounder to being this day 3 quarterback, and neither one of those guys looks like they're holding their hand up to really win that job. I think Arizona, of the teams you mentioned, is an interesting team because Carson Beck looked really good in the Hall of Fame game. He's going to have another opportunity now coming up in preseason. And, all he can do is stack impressive preseason performances. And if he does, I think he puts real pressure on Jacoby Brissett to start.
Vibes don't seem tremendously good in Tampa, where they were always overlooked to me for so many years, and everyone always picked someone else to win that NFC South. And now it just feels like with this whole Baker Mayfield contract thing and maybe them getting a little bit older, a little bit slower, I don't know how I feel about them in that, again, that bad division where, it's the world's tallest molehill, might win it. But what's your vibe on Tampa?
Yeah, I think that team's still got a lot of talent. I think the vibes thing is going to come down to how Baker Mayfield handles himself this season. It's not his first go-around in terms of a team not giving him exactly what he wanted. And the first time around, I don't think he handled it necessarily particularly well. I think the Browns, they screwed him as well, but Baker definitely threw his toys out of the pram once things went bad. They've agreed to kind of put a hold on this in Tampa Bay right now. We'll circle back around after the season. He's clearly not happy about it. Now, is he not happy about it in a way that he can still park it, go to work, play his best game and have a career year and then try and earn big money in the offseason? Or is he upset about it and that's going to permeate throughout the rest of the team and generally sour things there? One of those is workable, one of those is a problem.
I've never heard the saying throwing your toys out of the pram, but I just looked it up, and it's to have a childish temper tantrum, get overly angry, or make a big fuss because something did not go your way. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's probably one of those wrong side of the Atlantic idioms that doesn't translate.
It's a stroller, right, Sam? Isn't that what?
I don't know what a pram is.
Yeah.
Yeah, stroller, baby stroller.
So when I visited Scotland, I heard someone say that, and I was like, oh, it's a form of transport. I'm sure a bus is coming along in a moment. It's the pram. But no, that's what I think that refers to.
It's a good reference. I might steal that. And I'll just sound like I know what I'm talking about from across the Atlantic. Hey, what do you have the Rams as in terms of like favorites or close to it right now? And how would that change, if at all, if the Avengers get another superhero and they add Aaron Donald?
I think right now they are, clear favorites for the Super Bowl. Obviously, it doesn't mean they'll win. You still probably take the field over any favorite ever. If they get Aaron Donald, they only become more favored. But I think the two best teams in the NFL last season were Seattle and the Rams. I think they were pretty much a coin flip. Whoever won the NFC title game, I think, would have won the Super Bowl. And I think the Rams have taken significant steps forward on paper in a way that the Seahawks haven't necessarily. They've upgraded from Jared Verse to Myles Garrett. They added 2 corners at their weakest position, one of whom is, a top 10 player at that position in the NFL. And then, like you said, Aaron Donald may be riding on the horizon to join this team as well. And look, I don't think Donald's coming back if he can't play. Obviously, the question becomes, well, how much can he play? there's a chance that at 35 years old and being already a freak of nature and one of the greatest players to ever play, that Donald still has pretty close to Aaron Donald levels of juice. And if that's the case, I mean, this could be one of the best defensive lines we've ever seen.
Our guy Sam Monson with us here on G&D. In New York, I've kind of made the case that I don't think they're going to be good yet. Sam talking about the Giants, but I do think they won't be that pushover. I think they'll be a frisky, sort of 7-win type team that is a pain in the butt to play against with John Harbaugh and company. But this whole Matt Nagy, Jackson Dart marriage doesn't inspire a lot of confidence for them to have much of a high ceiling.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think that John Harbaugh and the bones of this thing in terms of the playing personnel are pretty good. I think he could have them as a pretty good team pretty quickly, particularly the offense, if they're able to get Jackson Dart really protecting himself a bit more relative to his rookie season. I think that's going to be a big part of his game now. Like, the rushing was impressive, it was formidable, but you need to be able to stay under center. You need to be able to stay as the quarterback upright, otherwise we're going to have problems. But I also agree, nothing about the coaching staff below Harbaugh really inspires confidence. Like, they brought in a kind of collection of guys that haven't had good runs of it in the last few years, and typically Harbaugh's been very good at hiring coordinators throughout his entire time there in Baltimore. I mean, almost 15 years worth of generally hiring very good coordinators on both sides of the ball. That sort of fell apart last season, and the defensive failings was really what cost him his job. It doesn't look great on paper, but maybe he knows something we don't.
Sam Monson, one of our favorites. He's on social at Sam Monson NFL, joining us here on Grant and Danny. AFC West, it feels like we've just all moved past the Chiefs being the team to beat in the AFC after certainly last year, but the last couple of years with some of their limitations. Are we doing that too soon, and is there a new team to beat in the AFC at this point?
I think the AFC is wide open, so I don't think they've been replaced necessarily by any kind of clear favorite the way you have in the NFC. And I think it is the weakest roster on paper that Kansas City's had for a while. But if they have one of those draft classes, where they've just hit a really good run and grab 3 starters that are good players, if Mansour Delane, if Peter Woods, if R. Mason Thomas, if those 3 guys are much better out of the box than people expected, that changes the outlook a lot. I mean, that would transform this team from what they look like on paper, a little bit of a concern, to suddenly that kind of disappears again, and the defense is still very good. So, that's difficult to do, but teams do that regularly. Seahawks did that recently. Teams, the Lions a few years ago, obviously with that draft class that they had. I think the Chiefs need a draft class like that to maintain the kind of position that they've had for the last, half dozen years.
What about their division mates, the Chargers? They had all sorts of issues last year, yet still won 11 games. The defense maybe outkicked its coverage a little bit, but what's your prognosis on them this year?
Yeah, I think people should be excited by the Chargers. We'll see what that offensive line looks like and how successfully they've repaired it. Obviously, 2 tackles coming back from injury is a big part of that, but the interior is still a question mark. If the line is halfway decent, I think Justin Herbert did put it together last season in a way he hadn't really up until that point in his career. I think he was playing at an absolutely spectacular level until that line just fell to absolute rack and ruin. If it's capable again, with Mike McDaniel in that in his offensive coordinator, Harbaugh still there as the head coach. Obviously, they lost Jesse Minter on the defensive side, but that team could be very good.
Sam, last week we had a big week for running backs getting paid. Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor among the guys that got cash. Has the running back market fully bounced back yet? And what's the next position group you think that could be in for some correction financially?
I don't think it's fully bounced back. And Brad Spielberger used to work with PFF, is now an NFL agent. He had a tweet about this, that if you adjust the Adrian Peterson contract for inflation, he would be on $35 million a year as opposed to 25. So the market has adjusted downwards for running backs. Not as badly as it had looked for a while. And that the other point Brad was making is that most of the guys that have gotten paid have been third contract guys, and we've gone through a gap of sort of not having that clean second contract, peak of his powers, young running back hit the market or come due for that contract, and now you get a couple of them this offseason, and so you're seeing the money bounce back. But it's definitely been a correction downwards from where it was, 10, 15 years ago. I think, justifiably. I think that is something that analytics was pushing and that has made sense. It's not that running backs don't matter, which was a sort of phrase, I think, to push things way too far. But it is that it's not necessarily a smart allocation of resources to give them the kind of money that they were on before.
Sam, if you had to go to the betting window right now this minute and take the over-under on the Bengals 9.5 wins, what would you take and why?
I think I'd probably go over. We know that offense is pretty spectacular. The defense doesn't even need to be good. It just needs to be not a disaster the way it was a year ago. And honestly, Dexter Lawrence by himself might be able to achieve that if he's back to being the player that he was for the Giants before the last couple of seasons. And so far, all reports out of camp are that he is. That he looks back to his best, and he's basically destroying every practice he plays in single-handedly. And they've added a bunch of other players. Boye Mafe, Cassius Howell in the draft. Like, they've added players to that group in addition to Dexter Lawrence. So I think the Bengals defense goes back to being average at worst, and then that offense should be spectacular again.
Sam Monson, Grant, and Danny on the Fan. Fernando Mendoza goes 1-1 to kick off the rookie quarterback class. It goes without saying we won't see Ty Simpson barring a Matt Stafford injury, but otherwise, with guys like Mendoza with the Raiders, Carson Beck, who had the big preseason opener in the Hall of Fame game, Drew Aller, who was getting early rave reviews in Steelers camp. Do you think we see all three this year, and when might we?
I think Mendoza gets in, a month into the season. I think that's usually the way that goes when teams try and slow play the quarterback is you get a month worth of play of the guy you designate a starter, and eventually you have to put in the future. So I think Mendoza's starting minimum by October. Ty Simpson, I don't think plays football this year, obviously, unless Matthew Stafford gets injured. Carson Beck, I think, will see time whether or not he's able to win that starting job right out of the gate. But there's no reason for them not to turn to him at some point this season. Whether or not they're not going to be good enough, I think, for there to be no reason to take a look at what he has in the back end of the season. Aller maybe could win himself the job next year, and if he's going to do that, they probably need to see him at some point this year. So that would depend, how competitive they are, whether Rodgers gets hurt, all those kinds of things. I think they'd probably like to have a look at Drew Aller if he continues to draw rave reviews.
The Jaguars were terrific last year. I know they won a bunch of games and with 13-4, but you kind of look it up under the hood. Top 6 in offense, top 8 in points allowed. They won kind of a tough division going against the team that's tough to deal with in Houston, who I want to ask you about in a second as well, Sam. But do you believe in the Renaissance, or are they coming back down to earth here a little bit?
Yeah, and the other thing being, Trevor Lawrence is kind of the last thing to click into gear there. As soon as Liam Cohen arrived, pretty much everything else was night and day different and better than it was before he got there. But Trevor Lawrence, for the first half of the season, kind of looked like the same guy. And then the second half of the year, he really looked like the light had come on. Now, we've seen that kind of false dawn from Trevor Lawrence before, so I think we're going to have to wait and see if he's able to pick up where he left off. But if he is, and if he really has arrived now, then, yeah, I think that the Jags will be, a legit team this year. That receiving core looks fantastic. Maybe they're a little dependent on Travis Hunter on the back end and in the secondary, but that should be a good team as long as Trevor Lawrence is what he looked like in the second half of the season.
Sam Monson, NFL. You should follow him on social. I always follow your work on X. You recently tweeted, by the way, about the dichotomy between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. And I've always been fascinated by those are two of the best of all time, and they just did it so differently, both on the field and off the field. And you made the joke about Peyton Manning because Brady was saying how shocked he was when he had breakfast with Peyton one time that he ate pancakes and bacon and sausage and biscuits with gravy. And here Tom Brady he was allowed to have like 4 peas and 6 ounces of Pedialyte that day or whatever. It is just funny to me how different those guys were to have been the GOATs of their era.
Yeah, it's great. I just love that story from Peyton Manning that, everyone's out here, particularly Brady, trying to squeeze sort of every last ounce. And Kirk Cousins is like this as well. He's trying to get every last RPM he can squeeze from his entire NFL career. And fair play. He's doing a good job of that. And meanwhile, Peyton Manning's just out there going, yeah, I'll have the pancakes, the sausages, everything you got, load it up, and I'm good to go.
If there's more gravy,
Extra
Maybe
sausage
we
gravy.
this sometimes.
Yeah, he had. You'd have to say, I guess, what just the mental acumen, because even physically, I know end of his career, Peyton's different, although he threw 55 touchdowns with a probably below average arm. But at the peak of his powers, how would his arm have graded out? I mean, it was really anticipatory and mental, right?
I think he had really, really good sort of arm velocity, certainly earlier in his career. Obviously, the thing that makes, like, Peyton Manning achieved one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen from a quarterback, which is when he came back from that neck injury and he tried to throw again, and it was like he didn't have the arm anymore. And so he had to basically relearn on the fly how to play the game, taking a bunch of stuff that he liked to do off the table. It was a game really early in his comeback. I think it was against Atlanta maybe, and he picked him off like 3 times, basically on the same throw every single time. And Manning was like, I just can't make that throw anymore. That's gone. I can't even attempt those passes. And so, like, literally on the fly in that season, he rewired his brain, relearned how to play football, and 2 of his best seasons came after that. Like, then he went and had absolutely, like, one of the best offensive outputs of all time off the back of that before his body kind of really caught up with him. And the very final season where he won the Super Bowl, that was physically kind of a wreck. But I don't know that there's many players ever that are capable of doing that, basically completely changing the way they play the game on the fly as you rediscover what you're capable of doing.
Sam, my last one, I teased it before. I want to ask you about Houston. I feel like if C.J. Stroud was just reasonable, they might have won that game in New England. Or if they just maybe handed it off and punted when they had a 10-7 lead, they might have had a chance to win that football game. But we all saw it. We all saw how bad it got for Stroud in that offense. But that's still a 12-5 team with an excellent defense. Just where are you at on the Texans this year?
Yeah, I mean, their defense may be spectacular again. And, Stroud was good for most of the season. His career's definitely kind of moved in the wrong direction from a spectacular rookie season. But he's still been pretty good for the majority of the time. The problem is, I mean, it wasn't just that game. The game before it, they should have lost as well, the way Stroud was playing. He's been disastrous the last 2 playoff performances he's had. And that, I mean, whatever about, do you need your quarterback to play spectacular football? Do you need him to carry the team? You can't have him out there, like, actively sabotaging the team in the playoffs. I mean, that's just too much to overcome, even for an elite defense. So, Stroud needs to go out there and show that he's capable of just playing average football, even when he's not in the groove, even when things aren't completely dialed in. He can't have an absolute collapse the way he had.
All right, pick a side here. The Eagles or the outrage on social media from everybody else? They post a video today of Quinyon Mitchell picking off a really bad Jalen Hurts pass, and they say right on cue. And it's based on, I guess, that he had been challenged to get an interception in practice recently by Nick Sirianni. But you still see Jalen Hurts making a bad throw and throwing a pick. Eagles fans aren't too happy about it.
I honestly couldn't believe they posted that. Like, it's I mean, whatever. It would be one thing if you were sort of showing, just the ball in the air and then the play that Mitchell made. But, like, the clip starts, like, staring down Jalen Hurts, and I assumed it was going to be, like, a great pass over the middle. And they're like, oh, no, that's the corner. That's awful. Like, the quarterback's the most important player on every single roster, and you put a clip out making him look bad. That was weird.
It's unbelievable. Sam, thank you, buddy. Good catching up as always.
Thank you, Sam.
Anytime, guys. Take it easy.
There's Sam Monson on Grant and Danny, the 33rd team. Coming up in 40 minutes at 6 o'clock, an IndyCar driver is taking part in the Grand Prix 250 that's taking place here in D.C. coming up in a week and a half. Danny caught up with him in studio today while I'm out here in Ashburn. Make sure you're locked in for that on the